Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress, starting the build-up to the 2018 Candidates Tournament, which will start on March 10th, 2018 in Berlin, Germany. It's going to be very exciting. I post videos on Chess to Impress every Wednesday and Saturday. By the way, every Monday and Thursday I post a video on Chess to Progress. 10 AM GMT is the time that I post my videos. So I have a few videos to go on Chess to Impress before the Candidates Tournament starts, and I will look back at the last 3 Candidates Tournaments held in 2013, won by Magnus Carlsen, in 2014, won by Viswanathan Anand, and 2016, won by Sergei Karyakin. And then when the 2018 tournament starts, I will do daily videos on every of those 14 rounds. So this video is about the 2013 Candidates Tournament held in London in March of that year. And the 8 participants here in alphabetical order: Levon Aronyan from Armenia, Magnus Carlsen from Norway, Boris Gelfand from Israel, Alexander Grishuk from Russia, Vasily Ivanchuk from Ukraine, Vladimir Kramnik from Russia, Peter Svidler from Russia, and the wildcard Timur Rajabov from Azerbaijan. So it was really Carlsen from Norway against 7 players who had been educated under the old Soviet chess system. Of course, the Soviet Union didn't exist anymore, but the way chess was taught had not changed that much. All the 7 players were educated, raised under that system. Also Boris Gelfand, who grew up in Belarus. After 11 of the 14 rounds, Magnus Carlsen had won 4 games, had not lost any, and was on top of the ranking. Then round 12 came on the 29th of March, and Magnus Carlsen, as you can see here, lost to Vasily Ivanchuk with the white pieces. And Vladimir Kramnik beat Levon Aronyan with the black pieces and took the lead, was now a half point ahead of Carlsen. Then round 13 came after a rest day. And as you can see, Kramnik was not able to beat Gelfand. He was better in the whole game, but Gelfand held firm and made a draw with black. Magnus Carlsen played black against bottom-placed Timur Rajabov, and after 89 moves he was able to grind out a win in an endgame. And that meant that he regained a half-point deficit, and that Carlsen and Kramnik were joint first, with 8.5 out of 13 games before the last round. In that last round, Carlsen had the white pieces against Peter Svidler, who he had beaten with the black pieces earlier in the tournament, and Vladimir Kramnik was black against Vasily Ivanchuk. The tiebreak rules were also in favor of Carlsen. Not only did he have white in the last round while Kramnik had black, but also the tiebreak indicated that the player with most wins would prevail. And Carlsen had won 5 games so far in the tournament, lost 1, and Kramnik had won 4 games and hadn't lost any yet. So if Carlsen and Kramnik had the same result, win, draw or lose in the last round, it would be Carlsen who would qualify to challenge Viswanathan Anand for the world title. An extremely tense affair. Carlsen and Kramnik did not only have to worry about their own game in the last round, they also had to keep an eye on the other game to see what was happening there. It was played on the 1st of April 2013, and we'll have a look at Magnus Carlsen white against Peter Svidler with black. And Carlsen opened e4, e5 from Svidler, knight f3, knight c6, bishop e5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6. Carlsen castled, bishop e7, d3, b5, bishop b3, d6, and here in round 6, when Svidler was white and Carlsen was black, Svidler played a4, Carlsen played b4, and the game was in the end won by black. Carlsen deviated from that game, he played a3. Svidler castled, knight c3, and bishop b7. I'm using Peter Svidler's comments, his analysis in the magazine New in Chess for this video. Svidler writes here that him and his team only settled on this move bishop b7 30 minutes before the game in their preparation. But he writes, much more importantly, we managed to reject most of the alternatives, which meant I could play this fast and with conviction. Carlsen played bishop d2 and queen d7 from Svidler, who writes that Carlsen started to use time here. And he writes, I felt as if I had passed the first skirmish with flying colors. a4 was Carlsen's move, which Svidler calls a natural move. Svidler answered with knight d8, saying, keeping it simple, not getting distracted from the original plan. The distraction was knight d4, as Svidler writes, and then knight takes, e takes, knight back to e2, c5, knight g3, with very unclear play according to Svidler. So he stuck to the original plan and played knight d8. Carlsen took on b5, took back with a pawn, and a pair of rooks was swapped. Bishop takes, and now queen a1 attacking the bishop does not lead to much after knight e6, which protects the bishop. And Carlsen instead played knight e2. Knight e6 from Svidler, knight g3, and Svidler played c5, and writes, played after the first serious think of the game. The alternative was rook e8, and then he had looked at knight f5, bishop back to f8, rook e1, and c5, which was Svidler's initial thought, and this is not worse than the move played in the game, which was c5 straight away. Carlsen moved his knight into f5, and bishop back to d8, as Svidler writes, played in the same let's keep the tension vein. Here Carlsen plays c4, stopping any c5, c4 ideas from black for good. The alternative is knight g5, but then black gets d5 in and assumes the initiative. So it's not as good as the move played by Carlsen, c4. Svidler answered b takes c4, saying there's nothing wrong with b4 instead. And then he gives this variation, bishop a4 hitting the queen, bishop interposes, bishop takes, queen takes, but Svidler says he was worried that he would drift in a passive, slightly worse position, something I did not really want against this particular opponent. A passive, slightly worse position against Carlsen is not something you want. So b takes c4 was played, Carlsen took back with the bishop, bishop c7, and here Svidler had expected queen b3, but he says that rook e1 is much more logical and it's much harder for black to achieve the d5 break, and Carlsen indeed played rook e1 instead of queen b3. Rook e8 from Svidler, and queen c1. This is a funny comment from Svidler. He says, this move freaked me out completely. White is thinking about an attack on the king side. But the engine is not so worried about the attack, but of course over the board it looks dangerous with white's pieces going into the attack on black's king. Svidler played knight h5, g3 from Carlsen, keeping the knight out of the f4 square, and g6, and Svidler gives that move a question mark and says that starting from this point the quality of play deteriorates sharply because of looming time trouble. The time control was 40 moves in 2 hours, but there were no increments in that first time control. He says he should have played rook b8 and the game is in the balance, but after g6 it starts to get very complicated. Carlsen came in with his knight with check, king g7, and here the move b4 is a move from the engine, and Svidler writes, it's only immediately obvious to the machine. I'm fairly sure this move did not occur to either of us, but here black is in trouble. And Svidler gives a ton of variations which I will not go into here. The game is complicated enough. Instead of b4, Carlsen played knight g5, consistent with his plan to start to attack black's king. Knight takes g5, bishop takes g5, and d5. Looking for counterplay in the center. Carlsen took that pawn, bishop takes, and here Svidler gives bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, and knight g4, and says this is much less ambitious, but with a completely safe and not inconsiderable pull for white. However, Magnus saw a much more attractive move and could not resist. So after bishop takes d5, he did not take on d5, he played knight g4. Bishop f3 from Svidler, and he played this after convincing himself that bishop f6 check, which was played in the game, was not checkmate. It took me a while to realize that this is just a check and not mate in 4 as I thought initially. But once I figured that out, I got very excited. Suddenly it looked like it might become double-edged. And Svidler then says that instead of bishop f6 check, Carlsen could have played h3, and says this is a safe alternative, but Magnus keeps playing for the maximum, as he almost always does. But you could have expected that in the most important game of his career he would have played more safely, knowing that he would qualify unless Kramnik would win with black against Ivanchuk. So bishop f6 check was played, and the king went back to g8. Knight h6 check, king to f8 only move, queen e3, bishop back to b7, and Carlsen played bishop h4. Svidler writes, only from this point on, with a couple of minutes left for the remaining moves, this is only move 30, and the pressure mounting, does Magnus begin to make significant mistakes. Much has been made of the fact that he did not play bishop h8, so instead of going to h4, he should have gone to h8. And it was also his former mentor, and I'm sure that Svidler means Garry Kasparov, who was surprised that Carlsen did not play bishop h8 here. And Svidler says, which I personally find rather harsh considering the situation. It would have been a very spectacular move though. And Svidler gives this variation. Queen c6, and that's threatening a nice checkmate here on g2. And then f3 to block the diagonal. Rook e7. Rook f1, queen d6, and king g2. And Svidler says white is better here. Black can do absolutely nothing with a cluster of white pieces in the corner, and white will continue to slowly improve. Well, we have to take Svidler's word for it. This is a crazy position. As said, the bishop did not go to h8, it went to h4, and Svidler played queen h3, again threatening checkmate on g2. Here Carlsen should have played bishop d5, and then this is the variation. Bishop takes, queen takes c5 check with a double attack is check, and he's going to regain the piece on d5. King g7, queen takes bishop, king takes knight, but then queen takes f7, and this will end in a draw. Again, Svidler gives a lot of variations. White is a piece down, but has compensation and should be able to achieve a draw. But after queen h3 checking, threatening that checkmate, Carlsen did not go for bishop d5. He played f3. And this one is the fatal mistake, as Svidler writes. Knight f4, and now black is winning. Carlsen took the knight, and Svidler took the bishop, that's now unprotected. Knight takes f7, that knight is of course covered by the bishop on c4. Bishop takes f3 with a threat. This is the threat, queen g4 is the threat, and then mate on g2. You cannot take the bishop, because then your rook is hanging. So after bishop takes f3, Carlsen played queen f2 to protect his king against checkmates. Here Svidler says queen takes f4 would have been better, but he played queen g4 check. King f1 is possible and would have been white's last chance, and Svidler analyzes this to a draw. Again, lots of very complicated variations which I will not go into. But Carlsen did not play king f1, he played queen g3. Svidler took on f4. Carlsen took the rook with check. King takes, swaps the queens. Bishop takes, and Svidler says, now it's all but over. And we're still not at move 40. This is move 37. Carlsen still had to make 3 moves, and he was in terrible time trouble. I remember watching the video of the game very well. He really only had seconds left. He played knight g5, h6 kicking the knight, knight back to f7, and h5. Knight h6, Carlsen has made a time control, move 40, but he is completely lost. Bishop d1 from Svidler, who also had made a time control now. And he writes that the rest is easy. Let's see how he brings this point home. Black has an extra pawn and 2 very strong bishops. King f2 from Carlsen, f3, h3, bishop f4, knight f7, g5, king e1, and this allows a nice finish with a piece sacrifice. Here it comes, g4. Svidler had to calculate it, but it's not a very difficult calculation. Definitely not for a super grandmaster. Carlsen took on g4, h takes, and now he took the piece. But the pawns are now unstoppable. g3 from Svidler, king hurries back, g2, king f2, but the last move of the game was bishop h2, and there's nothing that Carlsen can do against this pawn promoting to a queen. Big win from Peter Svidler and a devastating loss for Magnus Carlsen. But the unthinkable happened and both leaders lost their game in the last round. Carlsen lost with white to Svidler, but as you can see here, Kramnik lost to Ivanchuk. He had played the Pirch defense. Kramnik thought he had to win because he could not imagine Carlsen losing with white against Svidler. And this is the final position from the Ivanchuk-Kramnik game. If you count the pieces, you see that white is a pawn up, and it's not just a pawn, it is this pawn on b6, and that pawn is just too strong. Ivanchuk has just played king g2 to f1, and he's going to walk into black's position over the light squares, and once he lands on b5 or a6, the c-pawn will fall, and this pawn will go through the queen, and there's really nothing that black can do against that. And these are the final standings of the 2013 Candidates Tournament. Magnus Carlsen is the winner with 8.5 out of 14. Kramnik has the same number of points, but missed out on the match with Anand because he had won 4 games while Carlsen had won 5. That was one of the tiebreak criteria. Peter Svidler and Levon Aronian only finished half a point behind in joint 3rd place. Gerafant had 6.5 out of 14, the same as Alexander Grishuk. Ivanchuk only finished in 7th place, but had a big part to play in the final part of the tournament, beating first Carlsen with black, and then in the last round Kramnik with white. Rajabov finished in 8th place with 4 points. This is a very happy, exhausted and relieved Magnus Carlsen after winning the 2013 Candidates Tournament and qualifying for the match with Viswanathan Anand, which he would win later that year. The 2013 Candidates Tournament was quite an event. Hopefully we will see the same fireworks in 2018. A big thank you to Michael P and Gail Orr for their recent donations on PayPal. It's much appreciated. I'm looking to invest in new hardware and software, and those contributions are really helpful. If you want to support the channel, the link to PayPal is in the description box. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. Please leave a comment. If you like the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media. You also may want to check out my Chess to Progress channel. The link is in the description box. I have series there on ways to improve at chess, tactics, endgames, classics from the past and the present, and analyzing your own games. I was told once by a very strong player that those are the 4 components to become a stronger player. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.